What's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Had a coworker with 5 kids who could all go to USC for free once he has worked there for 15 years, even if he quit. He quit at 14.5 years for a job that barely paid more than he made at USC. Cost all 5 kids a free education at a top school since he couldn't wait 6 more months. Answer. My college ex was going to our private, well-known uni on full scholarship because his father worked in security and had for years. He had a younger brother with his eyes set on the college who was like 4 years younger as well. Dad stars, he's doing some stupid thing, can't remember if he had an affair or had started going to his car to sleep. His son's sophomore year and was fired before junior year began. His son was set to graduate with a high-paying degree with good connections, debt-free, but he now has like $60K in debt. Story 2. Myself, cashing out a 401k. The woman on the phone even tried to talk me. Story 3. I find that people are usually pretty private about their finances, except when they buy something they can show off. If someone made some terrible investment, you might find out about it years later. Story 4. Getting remarried. He was convinced the first wife was the problem. She was, in part, but so was he. Zero self-awareness. He's getting sent to the cleaners yet again. Story 5. So many MLMs. So many, and they never listen. It's like some kind of wall goes up. A coworker got fired, destroyed his marriage while trying to make it as some MLM stooge. To give you an idea how bad it was for long-distance cards to Hispanic countries in an era when cell phones were taking off and long distance as a concept was evaporating. He lost tens of thousands. Story 6. I knew a guy who was terrible with money, worked in a warehouse but spent all his money on substances and things for his controlling girlfriend. Then one day he came to me to show me his brand new car, probably around 40 to 50K. He takes me for a ride and starts bragging about how he took his pay stub to like 10 of those cash advance places and get 10K worth of loans and had been living like a king. It was as if he thought he found some sort of life hack. To this day, I'm not sure if he just thought he wouldn't have to pay it back or what. A couple weeks later, I learned he wasn't paying attention while driving and rear-ended a bus going way over the speed limit and totaled the car. Train wreck of a guy. Story 7. Paying twice the amount for a car over a bunch of years instead of getting something he, okay, you got me, it was me, could afford. Story 8. An intern at our local wild animal rescue admitted she racked up $150K in student debt, getting a degree that pays well below mine wage. Our interns get a 1KMO stipend, some food, and housing. No medical benefits. From what I understand, they'll have to do that for a couple, if years, and then they might get a min-wage job at a zoo. Mostly they end up getting a master's degree to become teachers. Story 9. I used to be a car sales guy, and I watched as someone traded in their 6-month-old $95,000 pickup truck for $70,000 just to buy the exact same $95,000 truck. Literally, it was the same truck. The only difference was that the new truck had a gun safe. I told the guy we could install a gun safe for $2,000. It would have been the exact same gun safe in the exact same place. Guy added an additional $20,000 in debt for a gun safe, but hey, I got to make a $95,000 sale. Story 10. It's not as bad as some on here, but a girl I work with broke her phone and simply took out a second contract and was paying both simultaneously. Story 11. When I was 19, I went to Miami with some friends on Cinco de Mayo. We got insanely tipsy and went bar hopping across the city. The next morning, I looked at my transactions and realized I had spent over $1,000. Story 12. I once knew this former goth kid who was constantly worried about what other people thought of him. So much so that he left a good job where everyone respected him and invested a ton of his parents' money into trying to start his own company just so he'd get more attention. But instead of just starting his own company from scratch, he bought a bunch of distressed assets he didn't understand, and then they lost the rest of their value quickly. The topper is he didn't research his company's new name, and turns out he didn't even own his dumb idea. I don't want to say the name of the business in case anyone has heard of it, so we'll just call it X. Story 13. Friend spent $50K on Twitch donations because he went through a hard time and was looking for acceptance. Really messed his finances up for a long time. Edit. The money was all on credit cards. Story 14. Taking out a loan where the interest was like 13 monthly, with no grace period for paying it back. Basically go to school and watch your loan increase monthly BC. You don't have a career yet to pay off the loan. That idiot was my sister, and she duped my parents into co-signing. They had to refinance the house BC by her sophomore year. It was going up by like $2K a month. To boot, they can't afford to help pay for any other sibling. Story 15. Going broke, keeping up child support payments to a cheating ex for a child that is likely not his. He saved enough for a day test, bought a new iPhone instead. Will continue payments, go 18 years for a child he has never met, for a woman who never loved him. Story 16. Sending a televangelist money for a blessing and then not having enough to rent a moving truck. So I had to be the blessing. Story 17. My roommate buys DoorDash almost every day. They'll maybe cook for themselves once or twice a week, but other than that, they order food in 5-6 times a week. I know how much they make, and I have not a clue how they can afford that. Answer. My roommate buys DoorDash almost every day. He would save a fortune just by going down, ordering and taking home the food. The markup that those delivery companies charge is ridiculous. For example, to buy McDonald's via Uber Eats is around $110 for my family of 5. Buying the same food at McDonald's in person costs around $60. And as an added bonus, when you go down yourself, you are guaranteed to get what you ordered when it is still hot. Story 18. One time I saved up $10K. I had a manic episode. I thought I ran a business. I do run a business, but I thought I ran a much bigger business, so I started hiring people by giving them $1,000 cash. I would just start telling them to follow me around, and I would have them do nice things for people. I spent $10K that day. Maybe the world is better for it, but it was a total waste of money. They still say they want to work for me again, and maybe someday my business will get big enough that I can pay people to just go around and be nice to people. I can dream. Answer. I have a friend who had a manic crisis during COVID, had trouble with depression, and did seem kind of hyper at times, but nothing looks this. Working online from home where he lives alone seemed to put him over the top. Sent crazy emails to everyone he knew, including friends, distant family, work, all contacts in his network in the area. Lost his job, his cousins, some friends. Had a psychotic break, briefly hospitalized, long-term delusional. Couldn't find work because word had gotten out in his field. He was on an amazing high for a month or two. Took a year to really begin to think clearly and recognize he had an illness. Couldn't find work, or found work for short bits here and there, but had breakdowns and lost them. Held on to his home and got by only because of help from friends and family. All because of one horrible episode, apparently triggered by isolation. Better and on meds now. Your episode sounds more fun at least. But bipolar does not make for good financial decisions. Story 19. I watched a kid I worked with take a $20K HELOC loan out on his house he planned to build a garage with. One of his friends hit for $15K playing blackjack, so he had the bright idea if he could double the money gambling, he could build his garage for free and pay back the HELOC. He lost every penny. Story 20. There was that post yesterday on our Just Rolled Into the Shop where somebody sold an '07 Hyundai Sonata for scrap and then the next day asked the scrapyard to give him back the 1,300 custom floor mats he left in the car. That guy has to be making bad financial decisions left and right. Story 21. My grandma made a credit card in my mom's name when she was 17. So when my mom was 18, she was already not off to a good start and didn't press charges. Story 22. My sister's husband reached out to me on some investing advice to make some quick money during the pandemic when they had access to some extra income on top of an inheritance lump sum they came into. Told him over and over that investing should not be looked at as some kind of get-rich-quick scheme and that any avenue that had that sort of potential had a greater chance of causing you to lose it all. Instead, look at it as a way to gradually build wealth over time. Explicitly told him that the market is going to be volatile due to the pandemic and no one having any clue what that would mean for the markets. Went over the basics and recommended a split of some Vanguard index funds, VTSXTX. I also covered the concept of riding the ups and downs and that by consistently investing, you will buy at highs and lows, which will even out over the long run towards steady growth. Reminded him multiple times that you do not lose anything in the market until the second you sell, and the difference between taxes associated with long versus short-term capital gains. Most importantly, I made sure to remind him that this is a gamble and that there is always risk involved and to never invest something you cannot afford to lose. What does he do? He dumps $35K, they're not wealthy at all, into the market and then pulls it out 4 months later, the first time the market took a dive. My sister then gets pissed at me for telling him to do all of this. Answer: I do not think that one single person who has asked me investment advice has ever listened to my advice to slowly build wealth with safe investment. Even though I have been quite successful, that's why they ask me. I tell them that it took me decades of effort, patience, and caution, yet they do not actually heed my advice and usually complain about bad luck or something. Story 23. Seen someone sell their house and take out a much bigger mortgage to buy a pub that had failed 4 times in 3 years. It failed and they couldn't sell. It bankrupted then and they lost everything. Story 24. Then, I won't name any names, but a good friend who literally had it all. The high-rise apartment in a house down the street with a pool, sauna, casita, Hummer, Corvettes, a successful business, and about $400,000 in Bitcoin. Threw it all away over a takedown for hire because him and his, non-related to any of the above successes, but from something about 10 years earlier before I knew him, got greedy and no longer wanted to split their financial gain with a third person. So yeah, hired someone on the dark web to carry out the crime across state lines, but communicated everything over text. All 3 men, my friend, his business partner, and guy they hired, have been caught and convicted. One received life in prison, and my friend and his business partner are up for the passing penalty. Also, he was only 35 when he was originally arrested. Answer: the stupid financial mistake was mostly the greed, and the $10K they paid the guy, like I said, literally over text. This guy was a certified web hacker, software engineer, and made some very stupid mistakes. Oh, on top of everything, he's an only child, so he's also ruined his parents' life over money he really didn't need since he's already so well off. Story 25. When someone is struggling financially, they inevitably believe the solution is to get an auto loan. On a related note, anyone who buys a car from Drive Time. Story 26. My ex Phil won 1.2 M in the Virginia lottery and decided to invest in the majority of it in Iraqi currency in 2004, that which didn't get spent on his crazy 40,000 entertainment system, which was eventually repossessed when he declared bankruptcy. Story 27. When my father-in-law died, his live-in girlfriend stole approximately $55K in cash out of his house. She claims she never found his money. The IRS found it in her bank account, though. Apparently, it's suspicious when you deposit a large amount of cash like that into your bank when your only income is the disability check you received by lying to get. We couldn't prove the money was his, so it was he said, she said thing, and the DA thought it would be a waste to charge her with theft. But because of the investigation, she got her disability revoked and had to pay taxes on the money. Serves her right. Story 28. Fudge timeshares. How are they not illegal? I know. Lobbyists. Wife's brother and SIL gifted us one for our wedding. Had I known what a shoot deal it was, we wouldn't have taken it. Edit. Noticed a word missing. Story 29. Someone I know bought a brand new car and had the payment structured for the 29th of the month. When she didn't get paid until the 1st and the 3rd, she was always a payment behind, and they started threatening to repossess the car. I told her that she needed to have her payments restructured, and she wouldn't listen to me. I guess she traded it in for another car, or they eventually did repossess it because now she has a different one. Story 30. My brother and his wife were in massive debt, didn't work high-paying jobs, and could no longer afford their 2-bedroom apartment while trying to pay off the debt. They moved back home into our parents' basement. A week before they moved in, they built a computer, and a year after that, they consciously decided to try to get pregnant, which they did, while still living in the basement and knowing they haven't improved their financial state whatsoever. Answer: I'm so scared this is going to be me. I ended up having to move back in with my parents after going on disability. I lived on their couch for the first 18 months. My mom's a hoarder, and it took her that long to clear her things off a bed. I'm paying rent from my SSDI, but nowhere near market rent. And I couldn't afford market rent for the area I live in now anyway. My parents have been amazing through this, but I'm so worried I'm going to end up scrounging off them for the rest of their lives. I don't understand how someone could be comfortable with this kind of living situation and not make any efforts to improve it. Story 31. My dad worked for the UN and built up quite a good pension while he worked there, a good $400K. He left the UN in his mid to late 50s. Instead of looking for new work after leaving, he decided to move back to Venezuela, his home country, and just relax for a while. During this sabbatical, his wife and her family talked my dad into putting almost his whole pension into a single stock with her stockbroker nephew. The stock was Venezuelan oil stocks. Maybe you have an idea how volatile the Venezuelan economy is and how high inflation is there. It's a bad situation. But still, my dad did the thing, and at first it was okay. But then it wasn't. Predictably, the nephew lost my dad's entire nest egg. The nephew ended up ghosting my dad and his wife. At this point, my dad tried to find new work, but because he was so close to retirement age, he couldn't find anything decent. So my dad, a PhD graduate who worked at a decently high level at the UN, ended up having to clean houses for money. Story 32. A guy who sold his Apple stock for a ring for his wife and honeymoon trip, about $20,000. If he had held it until last year, it would have been worth like $2.5 million. Story 33. A bunch of my coworkers gave thousands of dollars to another coworker so her BF could fly to Iraq and buy DNRs with their money. Story 34. Ran up credit card debt, requiring bankruptcy. Once they were able to build credit again, 7 years later, they proceeded to run up a massive amount of debt again, but couldn't go bankrupt again, so they used debt consolidation. The debt didn't come from sudden expenses. They just needed to buy things to feel better. Story 35. They got married to someone heavily in debt. The person kept their financial situation from them until after they were married. Answer: my ex-husband did that to me. He concealed about $12,000 of credit card debt from me. When I found out about it, he said he ran it up buying Taco Bell after work every night. We lived in different countries for the first year of our marriage, since I wasn't born in the U.S., so I was going in rather blind in hindsight. Turned out it wasn't just Taco Bell, but also commissioning people online for My Little Pony adult content. Hundreds of dollars, LOL. Edit. Also just remembered he blew hundreds on Extra Lives for Candy Crush as well, and only stopped when he saw a South Park episode making fun of freemium games. It culminated in him getting a loan for $12,000 from his father. His father is an attorney, so naturally he drew up a loan agreement for my ex to sign. What I didn't know was his father also added a line for my signature, and my ex forged it. I found that out when he randomly mentioned it to me a week or so later, and I am sure to this day he still believes that's perfectly okay and very legal. And cool, I guess. He sent it back to the wrong address, so his father never got it. I texted his father ahead of time and let him know the signature was forged anyway. So no harm done there. I get wanting help with debt, especially since I'm good at saving money. Just don't steal it from me. Ask. I'm happy to help a partner with that where I can. I'd already paid off an auto loan for him in the past, so I guess he just assumed he could help himself to my money. And we were married. I understand the concept of communal property, but I had that money prior to the marriage and he forged my signature. It was the beginning of the end, really. My trust in him vanished completely. People told me I'd wind up with half his debt and half my savings gone if we divorced. I got lucky though. He got a very high-paying job, 6 figures, right before I left and paid all his debt off. We agreed to leave with what we came in with, savings and retirement intact for us both. Story 36. 21-year living in dad's basement, paycheck to paycheck, went to a reptile exhibit and brought home 2 exotic frogs and a snake because they didn't have enough money for a bearded dragon. Answer: that's even dumber than I think most people can grasp. I go to Rexpo 2x a year for the last 10 years. Bearded dragon, $35 for regular little and I have one. Anywhere between $50 to $200 for an adult or exotic. Frogs. This is wide, from poison darts to red-eyed tree frogs to Pac-Man frogs. Each snake's, LOL. This can be $25 for a regular ball python, $300 for mid-price specialty patterns, to literally thousands of dollars. Your friend would have been way better off with just a bearded. Story 37. One of my girlfriends got herself in over $30K worth of credit card debt at least twice, if not 3 times. She's filed bankruptcy twice in her life. Most recently, she took out credit cards in her husband's name and got him in debt over $30K. He can't file bankruptcy because that could jeopardize his security clearance. Story 38. Neighbors. The bread-earner died. Her sister and her daughter were left with the place. They could not afford the payments. They would not sell. They let it go to foreclosure even though it had about $120,000 equity in it. New owners came in, did very little cosmetic work, just a little paint and fixed the fence. They sold it and made a $200K profit in about 6 months. Story 39. Guy I knew convinced his girlfriend to invest 6 figures worth of Apple stock that she'd had for many, many years into cryptocurrency right before it all crashed. No, they are not together anymore. Story 40. Know a guy who got into Bitcoin crazy early, like he bought a ton of shares for pennies. Then Bitcoin exploded and at its peak, he basically had like hundreds of thousands just there. He decided he was going to wait because it would only soar from there. It didn't. He still cashed out and made like 20K. But compared to what he could have gotten, he doesn't like to talk about it. Know a guy who moved to grow his company. He was doing really well, bought a house, and then shortly after decided to drop his old business and jump headfirst into a brand new one, unrelated to anything he knew about. Financial ruin, owes a lot of dangerous people a lot of money and is about to lose the house. One of the world's nicest guys, but he really fudges life up. Story 41. Me, I went to a for-profit art school. Also me, married someone from the same school. Thanks to not understanding the terms of the loans at 18, having grown up in poverty, we were pressured into private and federal, and the terms of taking forbearance when the world was facing the housing bubble crash, we ended up with $500,000 in student loans. Answer: colleges raise costs much faster than the rate of inflation, so they could turn institutions into country clubs. I was told it was the only way they could compete with other universities. The universities should have kept costs down IMO in spite of pressure to attract the best students. Predatory lending meant getting young people who don't know better to sign on to debilitating loans. Guidance counselors should have been warning students about this. The government never should have guaranteed the loans. I'm sorry you are in that situation and angry that so many institutions let that happen. Story 42. Watching an ex-friend make 4x more money than me, but couldn't pay her cheaper rent because she blew all of her money on designer clothes and perfume. Story 43. They won thousands of dollars and bought a new entertainment system instead of getting current on their mortgage, foreclosed on later that year. The thing was, the area had recently become the new it area for young families, and housing prices had skyrocketed. They easily could have just sold the house, paid cash for a larger house 20 minutes up the road, and still had tens of thousands left over. Story 44. Retire too early and go into the pyramid scheme called Primerica full-time. We almost lost our fudge house because of this, and nowadays they barely make any money from that bullshit. Story 45. My friend bought a used Hellcat Challenger yesterday at 10.5 APR and 380 Mo insurance. He lives in my other friend's spare room. Story 46. I know several people who live at home with their parents because they can't afford to rent their own place due to having a low-pay job, yet have had an Audi or similar since they were 20 or so, paying a ludicrous proportion of their income each month on renting a stupid car. Story 47. Buy an expensive car on credit and sacrifice their children's education just to look flashy and keep it up. Luckily, the children's other parent came through eventually, but geez. Story 48. Many decisions around new tattoos or dogs when they can't pay rent regularly. My aunt says the rich get richer and the poor get another dog. I find this to be true for some of my family. Answer, I deal with these people regularly in my job. Can't pay the rent and have of debt on car finance, payday loans, and credit cards. Go on to IVAs, payment plans where a private company pays off and consolidates their debts. The repayments are often unaffordable in the long term. They'll still go on holidays abroad or have very expensive mobile phone and Sky packages. At some point, you run out of options to help them keep their home. I worked with one customer whose rent arrears went from $1K to over $8K in a year. She's being evicted now. She could have prevented it if she'd followed the advice and taken the help she was given. Story 49. A guy I dated for a short time had been joining a MLM scheme selling insurances. I listened to his monologue and told him I had no money. He was furious and tried to sell insurance to our waiter at the restaurant. He failed again. I'm still laughing today. He was no good guy. Answer, people who get sucked into MLMs are so unbearable. I tell them up front it's a bad idea. Get out and don't expect a single sale from me. I will not perpetuate that scam, but we are still friends otherwise. Usually works out fine, but one time one woman friend invited us to dinner without telling us it was an MLM pitch. We find out after we almost finish eating, and I say bluntly, no, I told you not to do this. Her and her other friends' retort was, why did you eat the food then? You lied to us. You nincompoops. You're just mad. I feel absolutely no shame or anxiety saying no. LOL. Story 50. I had a friend who met a guy, fell madly in love, and took out a loan so he could buy a Harley just 1 week into their relationship. Oddly enough, he took off with the bike the following week and never once made a payment. Story 51. There was an option for people struggling during COVID to withdraw from their retirement savings. This person withdrew the maximum amount and used it as a deposit on a car loan. They're pretty young too, so the opportunity for compound interest they've lost is huge. Story 52. My dad had his own company, and someone told him it made financial sense that instead of paying himself wages, he should take out a loan from his company. He built up debt for 3 years while working full-time rather than paying himself. It had all sorts of bad tax effects, like he was required to pay interest on this, which was then taxed as profit of the company. Then he paid himself, again paying income taxes. It took him about 10 years to get out of that hole. Then he needed to sell his house because it was too expensive. But the buyer got cold feet on the last day before the sale. Rather than having the buyer pay 10 of the price to get out of the sale, he gave him an extension without an end date. The buyer then took 2 years to think about whether he wanted the house. All the while, my parents needed to keep paying the mortgage and couldn't sell the house to anyone else because of the contract they had with that guy. Brought them close to bankruptcy. I've personally paid a couple of $100 a month to let them pay for the mortgage during that time. Story 53. Anyone enlisted in the military buying a Charger or Mustang at astronomical interest rates. That shoot is predatory and should be illegal in all 50 states. Answer: a long time ago, I worked at a shoot little stealer ship just off Camp Lejeune, literally the first non-military driveway when exiting the base, heading into Jacksonville. The owners would buy every 4x4 Jimmy, Blazer, or Bronco they could get their hands on and line the road with them. They'd jack the prices stupid high, then get the new Marines to sign long-term loans at crazy rates. They kept up with what pay rates were and always came up with ways to keep the payments in line with reasonable monthly payments. I rarely sold a vehicle and only lasted 6 months. I couldn't do that to people. Story 54. Insist on buying NFT as the price would only go up. We are talking 5 figures on several mediocre picks that were done by famous people. Went through the fudge floor and they have never recovered from it. Story 55. I would say the guy I saw piss away 50 G's at the $5 blackjack table, but he could clearly afford it. Funny guy too. He and his old college friends were hilarious. Story 56. 1988. This guy walks away from the final state job interview that paid $25,000 free medical, dental, and a pension so he won't be late for your $9 an hour summer job as a lifeguard. Story 57. Me, walking away from custom home I built for wife and I, on mountainside facing Pacific, full unfiltered, fool's views of ocean warned me away. Distressed from the betrayal, lost my job, lived off savings and depression. Story 58. My own. Bought a 1.6 mil vacation home on an island that was destroyed by a hurricane 5 months later. Felt too good to be true anyway. Story 59. A guy in my fraternity got $30K for an undisclosed reason. I'm guessing a family passing or something, and he bet it all on the Yankees winning one game. They lost. Answer: a guy who lived on my floor in the dorms inherited $100K from his grandfather's estate. He was suddenly very popular, buying all the beer, pizza, new car, golf clubs, etc. He was living large. His parents showed up about a month later to attempt to help straighten him out and recover funds. The golf clubs and other items went to a pawn shop, and they even enlisted the RA to help watch out for the guy. Terrible for an 18, 19-year-old to come into that kind of money out of nowhere with no reference or respect for how to handle it or how it was earned. Story 60. A friend in her late 20s, living with parents and on min wage, won $280K online gambling. Lost it all within a few weeks. Could have set herself up properly with that money. Story 61. In high school, my buddy bought an illegally imported RX-7 FD that was totally Tokyo Drift spec. I mean, it was truly a magnificent machine. He got an inheritance from an uncle that passed away and blew the whole wad on this car from some sketchy Russian guys who brought it over in multiple containers. It drew way too much attention, and he got pulled over every single day. Well, he happened to get pulled over by someone who used to work in customs at an official capacity, seized and crushed. He went down a rabbit hole of bad decisions after that. I wish I had a pic of the car because it was gorgeous and stolen as hell. I'm sure. Story 62. Best friend bought a fifth wheel RV about 4 years ago, financed $23K with zero down, has used it maybe 12 times in those 4 years. Well, he's made a couple of expensive and irresponsible purchases since, and when I asked where he got the money for those, he told me that the bank app that he uses to pay the RV loan has the option to defer the payment without penalty, and that there are no limits for how many deferrals you can do. I tried to tell him what a steep idea it was to do that because they still charge you interest, but he didn't listen, and last time I asked, he owes $47K on that trailer that now has a leaking roof he can't afford to fix. Those trailers on the used market are going for around $12K, so he's completely fudge on this deal. IDK what his interest rate is, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's well past the threshold where his monthly interest charges are higher than his minimum required monthly payment, as in the loan will continue to grow larger even if he makes all his payments on time and in full every month. Never buy things you can't afford with money. You don't have people. Debt is the absolute worst thing you can do to yourself. Wealthy people earn compound interest. Poor people pay compound interest. Story 63. Had a friend who sold his house to move into a new one. The sale would essentially pay off his new one, except for $100,000 or so. But because interest rates were so low, he decided instead to put the majority of it into crypto. The crypto crashed and it's essentially worthless. Partied too hard over $500,000 on crypto and has nothing to show for it, or could have had a beautiful paid-off house with all the equity. Story 64. Had an unemployed friend inherit a boatload of money when her dad died. Instead of investing it and getting a mom, she took it easy for 10 years. She was homeless living in a van when the money ran out. Story 65. When my grandmother's second husband, who I know as my grandpa, died, she spent nearly all 50K of his life insurance money on a South African scammer who promised her romance and more money than she gave. She refused to listen to family telling her to stop. She subverted efforts by her own bank to stop her frequent questionable money transfers. Eventually, my parents had to close her bank account to force her to stop blowing my grandfather's money. I will never not resent her ignorance, selfishness, and inability to listen to anyone but herself. Story 66. A coworker I used to have worked every second of overtime he could for several years to save up for a house. When he applied for the house loan, he based his mortgage payment on all of the overtime he had been working. I tried to tell him that wasn't a good idea, but he didn't want to hear it. He ended up divorced a few years later because his wife got tired of him always working. Story 67. A couple of years ago, my friend was visiting Vegas for a few weeks, and he lent out $170,000 to someone who was essentially a stranger, but my friend thought that he was a very rich stranger. My friend is not rich by any means and was just on a hot streak while doing sports betting. He never saw that money again. The guy who he lent money to was actually broke and does this type of stuff all the time. Story 68. TLDR. I needed $800, ended up with a $3,500 loan. Now I owe $10,000. My girlfriend at the time and I didn't have time to run to the bank before work one day, but we had our rent money with us. It ended up getting stolen, so we went to apply for a loan the next day. We only needed $800, but I was approved for like $3,500. So of course, like fudge idiots, we got the full 3 days $500. We ended up blowing through the remaining $2,700 and then running up my credit card to just over $13,000, as I was the only one working most of the time. And I didn't and still don't have a good paying job by any sense of the word. We ended up breaking up like 6 months after the fact, and due to the nature of the split, I didn't want a thing from her. I just wanted to forget she ever existed. So now I'm on the hook for over $13,000 and made payment arrangements for the card. I get paid weekly. The payment was supposed to come out on Tuesday, and I got paid on Thursday. It wasn't there on Tuesday, so the company immediately sent it to collections, and that just pissed me off. So like a reasonable adult I just refused to make the payment at all for over 2 years. Eventually, the collections company found me, and now I'm paying them instead of doing what I should have done in the beginning. Story 69. Military dude married a girl 3 months after starting to hook up. He thought she had a good job because she liked expensive things. Turns out it was daddy's money and cut her off when she married the dude. Dude went from kind of struggling to $70K in debt overnight. His wife was an massive meanie and refused to change her spending habits. Answer: make it auto repair instead of military, and you've met my cousin. Hubby has to work late, so I'm taking date night and making it me night, followed by pictures of multiple large shopping bags and spa treatments on Facebook. Her parents paid for the wedding to be on a sightseeing tour ship and never gave her another dime. And just before I hit the post button, I remembered the military guy I knew. My mother-in-law did the wedding cake. She's done hundreds and has never had a complaint. Despite having pictures and texts confirming what inspiration was meant to be taken from each, they refused to pay her because it was the wrong shape, size, and color. When confronted with pictures and text agreements, they changed it up to being the wrong flavor. Well, a few months later, dude ships out for some training in another region or something. I think he was going to desert or tundra camp. It sounded interesting at the time. He gets home and finds their Dare apartment completely empty, except for the divorce papers on the counter. She left $5 in their shared account, took her name off it, and moved out of state. Story 70. I am a realtor in Southern California. A couple took out almost $120K equity in their home to buy lotto tickets. They thought with over $120K worth of lottery tickets, they would have a really good chance of winning. The biggest issue they had was trying to buy $100K worth of lottery tickets within the time frame between drawings. Not only did they fail to buy $100K of tickets, but they didn't win the drawing either. What they did with the remaining money is anyone's guess. People using their home equity for dumb purposes happens more often than I would like to admit. Story 71. Cheated on 7 years of back taxes, got like $20K in returns. Then they were surprised they got audited. Last I heard, they moved away to try and run from it, lol. Story 72. This older lady worked part-time in my kitchen. It was a fine dining, fast-paced environment. She would only work about 28 hours per week doing busy work. You eat peeling vegetables, washing produce, etc. Tasks I knew she could handle and wouldn't get overwhelmed. Unfortunately, her husband passed away and she requested a few months off. I totally understood and said, Take all the time you need. Let me know when you feel comfortable coming back to work, if at all. Take care, Barbara. 8 months later, she contacted me for a job. I was more than willing to have her back in my kitchen. I nonchalantly asked her how she was coping with her loss. She broke down in tears. She apparently got a 500 insurance payout from her husband's passing. Within those months, she attempted to open a restaurant and sink every dime into the establishment. It went out of business in 6 months. She was now broke as an elderly lady having to go back to work. Story 73. Herbalife, my friend's ex-girlfriend. She tried shoving it down his throat. She got thrown out of his life. Story 74. Having kids. I've unfortunately seen so many couples I know go from being financially stable pre-kids to being financially ruined and 247 broke post-kids. Story 75. Buying a purebred puppy while on a low-wage job with the end of your contract in sight, while also being a single parent in a rented apartment. Yeah, within a year she was on food stamps. Story 76. Had 800 in his bank total, spent 784 on an Airbnb for a single night to throw a party for his birthday when the owner said no parties. Lied to management at his job to throw it, got kicked out of the Airbnb in 30 minutes, and fired from his job for lying. He was gas station clerk. Couldn't get a refund either. Bro, I'm so broke. Why does all this bad stuff always happen to me? Story 77. My supervisor took out a loan against their 401k to pay their rent because their credit cards were maxed. 2 weeks later, they bought a brand new $60K Lincoln with basically nothing down because her daughter just had a baby and I need a bigger car for that. Story 78. My wife's mom and stepdad, they pay more than a mortgage on car payments. They live in a trailer. He had a Charger he paid $900 a month to lease. He was never going to own it, paid on it for like 2 years, and now he has a big old truck he's paying on. He won't use it to help us move shoot because he doesn't want the bed to get scratched. Their entire life is what not to do with money. Rent a center everything, constantly have the newest tech, and live in a double wide in a trailer park. I still can't believe it when I go there. It's actually a single, so not even a double wide. Story 79. Guy I know is a real estate agent and was selling tons of 7-figure listings back in 2020, 2022. He bought an $80K Ford Raptor while renting a small place and spends a ton of time driving. He could have bought a house with the money he had. Story 80. A gamer friend spent $1,500 on a laptop that's not designed for gaming, despite me and another friend advising him MJCH better options. Story 81. This is late and will be buried, but I have a 55IO coworker who invested her entire retirement savings into crypto shortly before it tanked. She probably lost 75 of everything she had. Story 82. Buddy of mine went to medieval times and bought like 600 worth of souvenirs in one trip, including like 2 swords. Story 83. Substances while having a decent paying blue-collar job. Boss had him under a microscope because the guy did decent work, but one ruinous mistake in insurance could blame the substances. Story 84. I sold all my Bitcoin for a 20K loss at 4K, a coin back during the very first run. I was unable to sell at the top because I was on deployment and couldn't get my 2FA code. Recently YOLO'd 20K into FRC on some really brilliant advice that it was at the bottom and will definitely recover. I rushed to buy with seconds left before the market closed. After hours, I lost 80. I recovered 315 of my 20,000 investment. So overall, I am about 40K in the hole of everything I've ever invested. The stock I was in before I invested in FRC, though, that was basically flatlined. Did go up 2,700 last week, though, so that felt good. But this pales in comparison to when I was in Chile at the casino, and the man next to me was playing 3 seats in blackjack betting 10K a hand and doubling down on almost everything. The table turned, and I went from up 4K to down 2K in a matter of minutes. The guy next to me lost over 300,000 that night. I'm not joking. I really do somewhat regret not asking him for a 10K card. They aren't chips when they are that big to play with. Answer: the most important thing to understand about digital currency is that they're a zero-sum game. Unlike a business which can grow and produce dividends, the only way you make a dollar in the coin game is if someone else loses a dollar. For every success story that gets bragged about, there's a loss story that isn't bragged about. Thank you for being brave enough to socialize your losses. Story 85. I bought my wife a surprise Lexus during the December to Remember sales event. I thought she was going to be so happy to see it in the driveway on Christmas morning, just like in all the commercials. Turns out she just got really mad because I made a major purchase without talking to her, and we couldn't afford it because I had been unemployed for a year. Story 86. I once had a supervisor who wanted desperately to be an illustrator. He was the most toxic person I think I've ever worked with, so when he retired, forcibly, He cashed out his investments and retirement accounts to pursue this dream. A year or so later, he returns to the workplace and starts filling out an application in front of me. I asked him why, and he said he needed an effing job. I laughed at him because I was both shocked and didn't think he was serious. He was a miserable jerk, and I'm sure they marked him down as not to rehire anyways. It was sad, but he was also not a nice person. Edit. I can add this much for those wondering. He decided to create his own greeting cards based on a concept he had for years. From what I understand, it did not perform well, which is odd considering the company we work for sold greeting cards. I always wondered why he didn't network his way into getting his cards carried by them. Maybe he couldn't, not sure. He didn't care for me, so I kept my questions limited, and most of it was secondhand intel. Story 87. Server at a restaurant that I know. Obsessed with the whole Andrew Tate alpha mentality, spent like half of his year's salary and took on thousands of dollars of debt on a fancy sports car so that he can be more of an alpha. Then he wrecked the car. Story 88. My maternal grandmother bought an eightplex to avoid capital gains when she sold her large house. The apartment complex was in the red and needed a lot of repairs. She hired my father to do them and be on-site manager. The place started making money. My mom, divorced from my dad, was mad that my grandma bought it in the first place, then hired my dad, then was proved wrong because it was making money. My grandma was in her 90s and my mom pressured her for years, so my grandma finally sold it. That place is in a high market area and is now worth millions. My mom made a poor financial decision based on petty spite. Story 89. Got out of the U.S. Air Force with 19 years time in service to avoid getting a COVID shot. For those unaware, 20 years of service gets you a lifetime pension and healthcare benefits. Answer. Similar to my story, I helped a family member get a six-figure paying job at the company I work for. Hiring manager really liked them and everything was going well until about a year in, and company wanted everyone to come back into the office. Their manager changed to someone else, and this new manager was known for being a hard jerk and difficult. My family member is a conspiracy theorist and against the COVID vaccine, so they refused to get it. I tried explaining to them that it will be easier to just get it. If you don't, they force you to get tested multiple times a week, wear a mask, submit answers to medical questions daily, etc. Of course, they kept protesting it, and this was around their annual contract renewal time. Surprise, surprise, their contract was not renewed, even though most people stay for multiple years. Good paying job, gone. They remained unemployed for almost a year. Story 90. I used to run heavy equipment in Virginia. I made $13.50 an hour. A guy on my crew was making $12.50 an hour. He purchased a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,500 square foot home for $425K. He was the sole income for the household of 6 people. They talked him into an interest-only loan. 6 months later, the housing market crashed. He lost his job and lost the house. I tried to explain to him that an interest-only loan was a scam, and he didn't make enough to afford that house and 4 kids with a wife that didn't work. I felt bad the next time I saw him, and he was living in an RV on someone's property. Story 91. A dude who owned a small convenience store in our town spent like $20,000 on fidget spinners. He was posting for like a year begging people to buy them as he would lose his business and his marriage was falling apart due to it. Story 92. A friend of mine who is very bad with money and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 a month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year, and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 a month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. Answer. I work for a government agency in building maintenance. We get hit up by water filter and air filter clowns every couple months wanting to sell us some bullshit. We are obligated to sit through their sales pitch, so we aren't biased, but we all know it's bullshit snake oil. The homes and buildings that do need specialized systems like these usually have them installed on day 1. Story 93. I was at Walmart one day. 2 ladies were in front of me with a cart full of various stuff, including beer baby formula. Wasn't for their kid, but maybe a grandchild. I assumed these ladies were related somehow. Maybe sisters, IDK. Well, they were discussing how they were going to pay for the items. It sounded like they were going to split it. When everyone got rang up, they couldn't afford everything. So they asked the cashier to take the baby formula off. Till this day, I hope a baby didn't go hungry. Story 94. My ex-husband paid $2,500 for an online adult content domain. Never made a dime from it. Oh, he also paid some fly-by-night company $1,500 to help us try to improve our credit. Then there was the $7,000 to pay off his truck. He then traded it in for a different truck in payment a month later when the truck he now owns started having mechanical issues. There are a ton of reasons he is my ex. Answer: at the end of the Cabbage Patch doll craze of the 1980s, when every parent and grandparent was scrambling to get a hard-to-find trendy Cabbage Patch doll for their kid, my ex-husband bought hundreds of imported knockoff Cabbage dolls from some crap company. Of course, no one wanted them. They took up space in our garage and became gifts. He latched onto any and every dumb, get-rich-quick scheme that came along. I took our kid and got off that sinking ship ASAP. He died penniless. Story 95. My cousin spent $100 of her inheritance and took out a lien on her home to buy a second home in the mountains. Thing is, it was being pushed over by a mountain, and they thought they could fix it. I went and seen it, and every door jamb was crooked, and the doors wouldn't shut. They took me down into the basement, and they were trying to use I-beams to stop the mountain from pushing on the home. I was just like, what the hell are you doing? That won't solve anything. Fast forward 6 months, and they asked me for $50K to help, and I declined. Fast forward a year, and the home collapsed, and now they owe over $300K for a home that doesn't exist, and if they don't make the payments, they lose their other house too, because they used the original home as collateral and could not get insurance on the second home. Total money lost upwards of $700K. Story 96. I do my brother Syl taxes each year. She got a big raise a couple years ago, owed more in taxes. When she found out that her taxes were more after the raise, she said she was going to refuse any additional raises so she didn't have to pay more taxes. I tried to explain to her that the raise she received was so much more than her increase in taxes, but she still maintained that she wasn't working for the government to take her money to give lazy people handouts. My brother, her, are both Trumpers. All she could see is that her tax increase would end up going to government handouts. She'd rather give up money herself than have any money go to lazy people receiving government handouts. In case it needs to be said, lazy people government handouts are her wording, not mine. Story 97. My neighbor proudly telling me he bought 6 Trump NFTs. MF Fear is broke AF, using what little savings he had on that BS. Story 98. A guy I went to HS with sent $10K to the classic Nigerian prince scammer. Yes, this actually happens, or happened at least once. He eliminated himself. Story 99. Passed on a full ride master's program at Stanford, so she didn't have to move away from her boyfriend. Story 100. When my parents split up, my father didn't want to leave the house, so my mother's attorney convinced him to guarantee to give my mother half the value of the house at that time whenever he sold it, and he could keep the rest. I still remember him telling me, housing prices only go up, or come out of this way ahead, your mother is being foolish. This was 5 minutes before the big housing collapse of 2008. By the time he was finally forced to sell 5 years later, his share was worth about a nickel after having to give my mom half of what the house had been worth 5 years before. I think about this every time he complains about not having any money, which is basically every time he talks to me. Story 101. Former friend of mine decided it was a great idea to invest their college fund into crypto and NFTs. We are not friends because I busted out laughing when I was informed of this stupid decision. They now have practically nothing to show for it. Story 102. My former sister-in-law had a thriving medical practice. She got so stressed that she joined the Scientologist and started taking their classes. She opened up 5-6 credit cards without telling my brother, maxed the cards out with hundreds of thousands in cash withdrawals, and gave it to that cult. Answer. I hear that Scientology has a very good small business unit with the words Scientology nowhere near anything that basically goes to small businesses and offers to teach them useful stuff for free. That stuff works. Then there's the slightly more advanced stuff, and that has a nominal fee, but they just saved you 15 grand on free advice. The course that costs $1,000 can't be a bad bet. Worst case scenario, you're up 14 grand. Then that works. You're up to the next stage. And now the next course is 25 grand. But hey, you're up. And actually, they love your business and it's doing real well. They want to invest. And then suddenly you're needing to take 100 grand courses and you just got 100 grand of investment from them. And you need to go to a bunch of classes and do a bunch of conferences and oops, things have stopped working. You need to invest a bit more into those courses and maybe they buy a bit more of the business. And before you know it, you're a husk making money for them, and they own your whole business. Story 103. I knew someone who got a loan for their wedding but decided to blow it all at a casino. Now they have a loan for $20K to pay off and nothing to show for it. Story 104. I am in the car business, so I have countless examples. People trading SUVs for better gas mileage cars when gas prices go up, then immediately trade in the fuel-efficient car for a big SUV again when gas prices drop. They just keep rolling the negative equity to the new loan. Even worse is the parents co-signing for a $1,200 payment for their 19 to 20-year-old kids who make $2,500 per month before taxes. Well, this is his dream car. He really needs a Dodge Charger Hellcat or Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. It's what they always wanted. He said he could make the payment no problem. The hoops some of these people will jump through just to get their kid approved for a $70K loan is insane. They will borrow money from family members for the down payment and run every family member's credit just to find one person with barely good enough credit to get an approval. You try to suggest they get the cheaper version of the same car and they will refuse. If you can't get them approved, they will still refuse a cheaper car and will go to 5 other dealers to try and buy the top-of-the-line car that they clearly can't afford. Story 105. Someone at my work bought a brand new Audi RS3, around 80K euros. He got 40K from his grandma because she gave it to him for if she is about to share a small fortune to buy a house maybe. But no, what he did was put another 30K from his own money to buy the car. The guy has no house and has no money left. Story 106. A family friend who is a Sahim took out a second mortgage on their family's home to start a LuLaRoe business. When it started failing, she decided to dig into her husband's retirement account. Answer. My wife got sucked into LuLaRoe even after admitting it was an MLM scheme before signing up. She had a lot of friends bullshitting her about what they were making off it. I warned her not to do it, but didn't stop her because I knew she would despise me if I didn't. About 6 months in, she started using my business bank account to keep buying clothes so she could have what is selling like crazy. In the end, it was all shoot clothes that had holes in them. That was the point where we stopped sharing bank accounts. Story 107. Was taken to the casino by my family a few weeks after turning 18, more to celebrate than gamble. End up with my uncle after a few hours. He's had enough to drink. At this point, he is somewhere between tipsy, and I've kind of been put in charge of him while the rest of the family catches up. We wander across to the roulette tables and an event I will remember for the rest of my life happens. He drops a 5 chip on black 6, pays out almost 200. He decides to let it ride. I don't know a lot about roulette at this point in my life, but I know the odds are incredibly low of this happening again. Black 6 comes up again. There is about 6,000 now there. This is more money than I have seen in my life in one place. He is going to let it ride again. I try to convince him to take at least half and put it aside. 3,000 is a lot of money. Black 6 comes up a third time. 200,000 worth of chips is sitting on the table. In basically begging him to leave at this stage, I point out to the attendant running the game that he's had a few drinks and really shouldn't be gambling. But since he put the money there, he is the one who has to make the decision. I tell my uncle, who is taking winning $250,000 in stride with the coolness of someone who has been steadily drinking beers all night, if he doesn't care about losing the money to give me half of what is there as a birthday present. All please fall to deaf ears, and Black 6 rides once more. Black 6 does not come up a fourth time, and enough money to buy a house disappears faster than it came. My uncle's demeanor is unchanged. He is as unperturbed at losing the money as he was winning it. Deeply shaken, I drag him off to find the rest of my family. I don't tell his wife about it, but tell my parents as we are driving back home. Well, that's Russell. Story 108. A guy I worked with found out that check cashing places were offering $15,000 no-question-asked loans. The interest rates were fudge insane. I begged him not to do it, but he impulsively went on a lunch break and got $15,000 in cash and deposited it in his bank account. This was 6 years ago. He is still struggling because of it. He lost his wife and kid because he drank every penny of it in a summer. He got eviction notices, and the stress was too much to the point where he had a psychotic break, which lasted for months. He is pushing 40, lives alone, can't see his child, hasn't had intimacy in a few years, and is forgotten by most of his friends because he was delusional and hallucinating for months. Story 109. Worked with a 50-year-old guy who looked like the arse end of a rhino and disliked anyone not from England who sent 10K to his fiancée in Thailand. Had never met for a boob job, clothes, and flight over. Oddly enough, her naked pics and promises of anal when she visited stopped once the money had been sent. Answer. We had to talk to one of our employees a couple of weeks ago about something like this. He's not the best looking or most intelligent guy, but he's a nice guy. Apparently, he met a girl online who lives in Atlanta. We saw her Facebook page and you could tell Madari's was fishy. She was this smoking hot blonde with only like 4 pictures, all in skimpy tops and lingerie. No other posts on her page, just pictures. She told him she was single and had no family. They had all passed away. He decided a week after meeting her that he was going to quit his job and move to Atlanta to live with her and help her rent an apartment. Us fellow employees and his family kept telling him it was a scam or catfish and not to go through with it. He got pissed and apparently had tragic end thoughts and checked himself into a mental hospital for a couple of days, but eventually he agreed and didn't go through with it. Story 110. I'm a vet tech, and in the last month I've seen 3 different owners sell their old dog because they couldn't afford the medical bills, and a week later come back with 4 Himalayan kittens. They couldn't decide, so took all of them. Down to 2, gave them away, and 10 weeks late on consent vaccines. 2 husky German shepherd puppies. It was a great deal. The young man has no job, a new apartment, a dog he can't neuter, and 2 cats who he constantly walks in to say they have fleas, ask for home remedies, and leave again. New puppies have worms, and doctor wouldn't extend credit beyond the $500 already owed. Screamed that I was eliminate his dogs, and everyone wanted his pets to die. Also, the dog and 2 cats were abandoned with previous roommate. 2 puppies for themselves, 1 for her sister, and 1 for her best friend. They look like bullies with skin allergies in their future. Got a boyfriend, and moved away, leaving the dogs with her very frail mother. They all looked at me like I should squeal in delight at kittens and puppies instead of breaking my heart for their old pet. The 27 Sep 23. Answer: we had an owner come in crying about money every single monthly visit because her Craigslist mutt, which was a white pit bull, had severe skin allergies. Between the Cyto point, the prescription food, and her part-time minimum wage job, she would despair of the cost. One visit, she tells me she's getting another Craigslist puppy, and what do you know? It's a white Craigslist bulldog. I beg her not to and tell her she's going to double her bills because this puppy is going to have the exact same problems. Next time I see her, she shows me her new puppy that she just had to buy because the guy was harmful behavior and she needed to save her. 6 months later, the allergies start, and she had double the bills. The worst part of this story is the first dog was crazy aggressive. It had already eliminated a cat and her elderly Yorkie. Story 111. Someone makes the decision to have a baby to keep a relationship. They had neither a house nor job. To have a baby isn't cheap. Story 112. I work at a casino, so I constantly see the pathetic depths people will sink to, especially the high rollers who will just casually lose 10K in 15 minutes. It's insane to me, but they can at least probably afford it. It's the average income people who will continue to empty their bank accounts in hopes of digging themselves out of a deep hole, or the ones who don't know when to stop and lose everything they just won. Story 113. 2 decades ago, a friend took her entire 401k to do a trip to the Antarctic to see penguins. She was beginning to lose her eyesight, and it was a dream of hers. Turns out it's a good thing she went because within a year she had lung cancer and died. Not a great decision on several levels, but in the end it worked for her. Fate intervened. Story 114. Put a lot of money into a house in a state that's running out of water and breaking heat records every year. It was me. I should sell it before more people catch on and before the inevitable housing market crash, but I know I won't. Second mistake, I'm sure they're with Be More. Story 115. My poor, sweet, trusting to a fault grandmother lost her home after she put my aunt and her then husband on the deed. He had a massive gambling problem and took out a bunch of loans against the house, which of course he never got back. Obviously, there are few things more irresponsible than going into debt to gamble, but the resulting cruel twist could have been prevented if my grandma hadn't entrusted her life savings to that sleazebag. Story 116. My awful aunt was the trustee for my grandparents' estate. When they passed, she decided to sell their house to a random realtor who put a leaflet on the door. To the realtor, not with the realtor. It wasn't put on the market, and the aunt rejected a matching offer by me after I argued hard to actually list the house and have people bid on it. The realtor slapped a new coat of paint on it and sold it a couple of months later for literally $1 million more than she bought it for. Answer: I am so extremely sorry for you. and pissed off. I too had a cunt aunt. My aunt gambled her $80K inheritance from grandma. Later, she tried to take all the inheritance that was meant to be divided amongst the 4 remaining siblings when her sister died, even going to my mom to get her to sign her share over, which mom did part cause of elderly, part because she didn't want the money, not caring that she had kids struggling herself. I'm thankful my sister heard about it and reminded her that at least 2 of her sons and in of her daughters were near destitute and that I had a massive uni debt I needed help paying off. My mom decided to sign away her share of the superannuation, bitten at the bank account balance. My aunt was pissed she didn't get it all and had disowned everyone in the family. She's a narc and only obsessed with the veneer of money. Really pathetic. And other times she had claimed grandma's antique Singer sewing machine as her inheritance, thinking it was worth thousands. Later, when she found out it was only worth about 50, she threw it in the skip bin. My dad fished it out for me, but my sister claimed it, which is more than fine. My sister restored it and displayed it in her house. A couple years later, my aunt visited and saw the sewing machine and went on a tirade that it should have gone to a daughter, not a granddaughter. Despite my dad literally pulling it out of the skip bin my aunt had thrown it in. I'm glad Dad had secretly grabbed a blanket that belonged to Grandma as a kid, had an older German fairy tale stitched on it, and gave it to me before my aunt learned of it, and threw it out too. My sister has also claimed that, though ha. Story 117. My brother's ex fell for a Craigslist scam. She found a motorcycle and the guy needed money up front to pay bills before she even saw it. We told her don't do it. It's a scam. She said she already sent $1,000. Of course, he was never available to show her the bike, and we found out from my brother after they broke up she actually continued sending him money in hopes of getting the motorcycle. I think she was out $3,000 by the end. Answer: my ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an over-trusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life. And one day a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so gifted to him. He loved that thing so much, tuned it and fixed it up. Then a giant ball of tragedy struck that put us in very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island. Being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive, he had to sell a lot of things. And much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there. So he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s, and was worth at the very least $80,000. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraint on having to get rid of it before the move. Someone contacted him and offered to buy it. And here is where he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be all right to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but darn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full. As I'm sure no one here is shocked by, the person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to have to live off of until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful, and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad, but it's just how it is. Story 118. Knew someone who answered those scam emails thinking they would get rich. Last I heard, he lost around $50K, emptied out savings account and maxed out credit cards, left in debt, and had to move back with ailing parents. Not a close to them at all, but more like a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. Motherfucker just would not listen. Genuinely thought he was going to be a millionaire. They kept stringing him along until the bitter end, and then poof. Biggest concern his friends had was him trying to milk his ailing parents for their last nickel and dime. Fortunately, he wised up and knew he'd been had. The last I heard of him was he had an hourly job somewhere and trying to get out of debt. Story 119. Guy worked for like 30 years at the company I was with and was set up with a great pension if he retired at a certain age. Like probably $5K a month in pension, and he lives a relatively expensive lifestyle. COVID happened, and the government put out a notice saying there was potential that all federally regulated businesses, which we were part of, would need to get the vaccine to continue working. He overreacted right off the bat, and even though they didn't follow through with this policy, he still retired early at a huge reduction in pension. Could have been living comfortably for the rest of his life, but now he is looking for construction jobs in his 50s because he can't make ends meet anymore. Jumped the gun for absolutely nothing. He was planning on retiring in 2 years but cut it short because he was mad about the vaccine. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.